Hey, it's Rich back with you for another video here at the OCR hangar, and I've gotten some comments recently about checklist use in the videos, and rather than try to answer each comment, I wanted to make a quick video about it because it seems I'm getting more darts thrown about checklists. So we're going to make a video. I have a lot to say about checklists, so we're going to make a video on checklist usage. Okay, so we came in the conference room here. Ryan doesn't know what we're talking about, but I decided to bring him in on this short discussion about checklists just to kind of get his feedback. He's at a different point in his flying and has a different perspective. And we have a pretty good relationship where I'm not worried about him pulling any punches with me, vice versa. So I get not a lot, but I have multiple comments since I've been doing this channel, or we've been doing this channel, on lack of checklist use and critical of me not using checklists. And before I kind of talk about what I want to say about it, let's get a little bit of feedback from you on checklist use, main points of why we use checklists, and then let's just focus for a minute on normal operations, forget emergency procedures.
I think checklists are definitely very, very important to abide by. At this point in my journey with flying, I could say when I first started flying, probably the first almost up to 700 hours or so, I was always using checklists, because I was just afraid I was going to miss something. I didn't want anything to happen to me. And then I also saw some video on someone missing something on a checklist, and then an accident happens.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But then as I started progressing and started flying a lot more different aircraft, and a lot of them are pretty similar for the most part, with little different changes on the checklist. I found myself not using checklists as much, unless I'm in a very unfamiliar airplane. Like if I hop in an airplane that I have barely had any training on it or barely flown it before, I will usually go by the checklist to see, make sure, every airplane starts the same, but some are slightly different.
Right.
Things you have to do for it. So I think they're good, really good, useful material to get in the airplane, get going about everything, and especially if you're new to the aircraft.
Right.
But as time goes along and you get more experience, you tend to do the same thing over and over again, and it becomes second nature.
Right. So generally, I would say a conventional perspective on checklists. And before I say what I'm going to say, I would never, encourage anybody to not use a checklist. Right. That's not really the point of this discussion. There's a couple of points that I want to make. The first of which, relative to the videos, is we edit the videos. So just because you watch a video and you don't see me use a checklist, you cannot conclude that I don't use checklists, right? I mean, that would be foolish, because we edit the videos, and really the point of these videos has been to highlight the airplanes, not my flying technique. It's really been about the airplanes, and so me reading a checklist is not really, in my opinion, that productive for people that are looking at the videos evaluating the airplane. You don't hear anybody on YouTube or really anywhere, in my opinion, like highlighting in the video that they spend a lot of time understanding the systems in an airplane. They more say, I'm religious about using a checklist, right? Well, that's not deep, meaningful information that's going to enhance the safety of a flight. You need to understand the systems. Get in a book, read about the systems, understand what the systems do. If you have a malfunction, how are you going to deal with that? Master switch on is repeated over and over and over and over and over on checklists. But something much more important, like reading and understanding the systems of the airplane, that's critical to me. It's not on any checklist. We could go out in any one of these airplanes and it's not on a checklist. You and I looked at this CJ3 that went off the end of the runway, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, is it probable that person read every item on the before landing, the descent, approach, and before landing checklist? Probably so. Probably. Did that save it? No, didn't save it. Didn't make him any safer. He made a horrible decision and went against a lot of things. But you could say that he did everything on the checklist.
Mm-hmm.
And again, that did nothing for the outcome of that accident.
Yeah.
The girl who passed away recently in Tennessee, same thing. Same thing, but different in that the spot she could have followed the checklist every step of the way up until the flight. It seems she lost control of the airplane. There's no checklist that's going to save her. There's nothing she can pull out and run and get out of that situation. It's not going to happen.
Yeah.
The twin that spun in recently, I don't know if you saw that one. The kid was calling on the radio, Mayday, Mayday.
Oh yeah, I did actually see that.
And there's no checklist he can pull out and run in order to recover from that situation. So the point is, if you're pointing to a checklist as a meaningful way to operate the airplane much safer, I think it's a facade. I think it's misaligned, and it shouldn't be used as a measuring stick of a good pilot. And not just say, I haven't flown for a while, so let me pull the checklist out and make sure I do everything. You see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
That's the point of what I'm saying. Okay, we're gonna. Hey, what's up?
Welcome to Flying with Rich.
Oh shit, no, really? I'm sorry.
You blew 2 hours of video now.
I'm just chatting, I'm sorry. Dang it.
This guy does not use checklists.
We should have had him. He's another perspective.
Put him on the spot. We're still going.
Well, yeah. Sit down. We're gonna put you on the spot.
That's my turn.
Good portable.
Whatever.
You got to go to wardrobe and makeup before you can join.
How long does that take, Brian?
1 hour.
Okay, so here's you haven't heard anything, right? You just walked in. This is not staged. You probably seems staged. It's not staged. So I've taken a few darts on not using a checklist in my videos, right?
Oh, right.
Right. Now, I've already said there's this thing called editing.
Perfect.
So sometimes, but beyond that, how many hours do you have now?
Just crossed 10,000.
And you have airline experience, you have big jet experience, you have 172 experience, twin Cessna experience, so broad range of experience, okay? So taking into account how you know me and people telling me, criticizing me, or beyond that, using a checklist as a indicator of a competent, safe pilot, watching a pilot, on a video.
It's the proper way to be trained using the checklist, but again, it's when it's safe and applicable to do so. So
Right.
there are times as single pilot pilots that you can and cannot use a checklist. So, but again, with your editing and everything, I've seen you use checklists, and it's not an issue. I'd ride in the back of your airplane anytime.
Yeah,
so,
right.
Yeah.
That's right. The best measure is what I get in the airplane with this person, or what I put my family with them, is probably more important. Well, that's an easy one for me, because I would point 100% to recognizing your reaction to stress and pressure. And if you're the kind of person that tends to overreact and do things quickly under pressure and stress, I would say you really need to get a handle on that if you're flying airplanes, because that will kill you faster than anything. Because if you're you could be in that, any one of us could be in that situation today, flying. And if you react to it the wrong way, you're almost assured death. And that's another thing, we don't really evaluate or train. We certainly don't evaluate it. I've been with guys that are very low time, and you put them in that situation, and they handle it pretty well. There's just a guy that lost an engine on a 210, a single engine 210, after takeoff, not a lot of experience. I don't even know if he had an instrument rating. Over trees, he has the presence of mind and the ability to ratchet down his emotions and anxiety, puts the nose down, glides it into the trees, and walks away. Okay? This is a guy with relatively low time. Then we go to the guy in the King Air in Wichita in flight safety, well-trained, flight safety trained, thousands of hours, by all accounts a great pilot, and he rolls down the runway in a King Air, a multi-engine airplane, loses an engine, and rolls it over into flight safety and crashes. Lost his mind. He starts calling for an emergency on the radio. He panicked. He didn't have the presence of mind to lower the nose. In the King Air, you got lots of King Air time. Wichita, Kansas, day VFR, light. You didn't have to put the gear up. Just put the nose down. You know, if you could just get 200 feet altitude, you're clearing everything, right?
I used to tell my students when I flight instructing for a long time, still do a little bit, and then compare it to you're in the middle lane of a freeway, the person on the left starts to veer in just a little bit. All you have to do is slightly move over, but the people that overreact crank it over and then run into 3 other cars because they're trying to avoid the one car. You have to keep your emotions in check.
Yeah, you have to be able to do that. To me, that's probably the single most important thing. And also, when you panic, you get tunnel vision, and your mind focuses on things right here, so you lose perspective on other things, and you know it's all over the place. Like you read these accident accounts, and it's like, how could they not see, you know, that they're nose down, headed for the ground, and they're pulling. How could they not see the ground coming and think, oh, I gotta release some back pressure and try to pitch out of this? But what you don't understand is they don't see it. They're so focused here that it's like they're blind to what's really happening, and that's what panic does. So, Danny, you know, you've had soup to nuts training in aviation, right? You've had primary all the way to airline and corporate, and best corporate training and the best airline training. Have you ever had any specific training to deal with anxiety and stress and pressure? Does the airlines put you through that?
No, I would say probably the one that I would actually like to build upon is the general emergencies training, where we go into the pool at flight safety, and there's one in Savannah where they do a lot of Gulfstream training that I fly, and they have simulations of you ditch in the water. And what I'd really like to build on is actually go into a dump tank where they actually flip you over.
Yeah.
Because again, it goes back to the surfing analogy. You're underwater and you're starting to panic, you're going to burn more oxygen, and you just need to take a step back and realize all I need to do is exactly what I was told, and it will kick in. And like you said, with the tunnel vision, take a step back, look at everything first. Don't have the fastest hands ever, because sometimes that's going to be worse.
Yeah, exactly.
And there's also a good example of checklists are not always applicable even in a 2-pilot situation. The Gulfstream has a rejected takeoff checklist, and it tells you to go through and make sure the spoilers are deployed and you do maximum anti-skid braking and all that stuff. When you have to reject a takeoff, you can't pull out the checklist and do that.
Exactly.
So it's
and the most critical phases that really end up killing people, you can't read a checklist.
It's a checklist, not a do list.
Exactly.
You have to do it when time allows to make sure that you caught everything in a high stress situation.
And I guarantee you could put Danny in any airplane in our ramp, someone he doesn't even have time in. Don't give him a checklist, and put him in a pattern. He can, because he understands airplanes and systems, he can safely land the airplane. No checklist. Because he understands how airplanes work, and he can draw conclusions about how the landing gear probably works, or how the flaps work, where I need to look to determine what speed I can put flaps out, what electrical equipment do I need to safely land the airplane. In any airplane, he doesn't need a checklist.
Mm-hmm.
Now, am I saying don't ever use a checklist? No, of course. If he has a checklist, that's another resource, but he understands airplanes well enough that he can land any airplane based on understanding, getting back to what I said earlier, the systems of the airplane, how it works, and the limitations. And you don't have to have a checklist, and that doesn't make you, and I think that's probably the best point I can make. Would you disagree?
Absolutely. Like, especially with most of the airplanes that you fly are single pilot.
Yeah.
You have to do it as time allows. And
Yeah.
You've been well trained and you have enough experience that you're going to get the job done, and then you're going to check yourself when it's safe to check yourself.
Exactly.
I was just in a very high stressful environment that my previous job.
That's a cop.
Yeah, as a trooper, that would, as a state trooper, that would put me in those high stress situations where, you know, it's 1 second, life or death, or, you know, losing your job too. So,
And you could train yourself and learn to be better at it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the biggest thing is training. There's never not enough training to be done. There's always something you can do, whether it's the same thing over and over, because that's just going to build your confidence up.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
going to build your, you know, handling stress under pressure up. And I've had the feeling of, you know, something very drastic happen, and all of a sudden it just kicks back to training.
Yeah.
It's, as pilots, you have to, if you're flying on your own, or whether you're going to flight safety or SimCom once a year, is once a year really enough for you to be, you know, well trained on whatever aircraft you're flying? You should put yourself in, you know, go up with someone, put yourself in situations, you know, an engine idle, you know, practice this stuff, and, you know, have that person do it to where you're not prepared for it and not, you know, ready for it.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, Rich and Danny both do numerous amounts of training throughout the year with other pilots, to where, you know, their experience level, you know, they see all the ins and outs of it, of people, bad pilots and good pilots. But, you know, does that make them not a good pilot for not using a checklist, even though they have all this experience on, you know, even with training people and, you know, bad emergencies? No, not at all.
I'd say for the majority of the general aviation pilots, don't just do your flight review every 24 months and do the bare minimum and ask for the 1 hour ground, the 1 hour flight that just gets you signed off.
Yeah.
Continually keep up, continually keep learning. You will always, like, I've never stopped learning. There's always something that I don't know and I build upon. So that will give you more confidence, which will decrease your anxiety if you have some anxious tendencies.
Yeah.
So I think don't just do the bare minimum.
Yeah, that's good advice.